Welcome on Texas football. I'm Bobby Burton, joined by Gerry Hamilton. Gerry, gut punch to the Longhorns recruiting efforts in 2025 for the class. The state's #1 prospect, Dakorien Moore, just moments ago announced for Oregon, ostensibly over the University of Texas as well as Ohio State and LSU. This is a big one for the Ducks, but a bigger loss for the Longhorns, who thought that Moore, who has many ties to the city of Austin through his relatives and long-term family, just did not see the future at Texas at this point in time. I know Texas is going to continue to recruit him, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. But Dakorien Moore goes to Oregon today. What does this do to the Texas recruiting class? What are your thoughts on it, et cetera?
Yeah, my thoughts on first off on the commitment are Dakorien Moore, I think at the end of the day, went where he wanted to be. And I know that's tough to hear for Texas fans, but I'm always going to be real. I said this on Coffee and Football. His decision, I think, was where he wanted to be at the end of the day. He got his emotional commitment out of the way with LSU. Odell Beckham was his favorite player. That made him an LSU guy. He followed that. That's who he identified with. So he committed to LSU initially. When he backed off of that, when he talked with his family and he backed off of that, he came down to, I've been through this process once and I made an emotional decision. Now I want to make a decision on where do I really want to be, not where my favorite player went. And that's what this recruitment came down to. Where did he want to be? I think he wants to blaze. At the end of the day, he wants to blaze his own path. That's just the key at the end of the day. He knew all his family wanted him in Austin. He knew how much that would mean to his family. If he was in Austin, that doesn't mean he doesn't love his family very much, because he does. I think also Colin Simmons from Duncanville went to Texas, SEC. Caden Durham went to LSU, SEC. Keelan Russell, his quarterback, flipped from SMU to Alabama, SEC. This is a guy who clearly went with where he thought he thinks he wants to be in college, and that happens to be blazing a different path than a lot of people thought it would be. And when this recruitment kicked back off once he decommitted from LSU.
So Gerry, you look at it, and I'm trying to, think through all of this. What does this do to Texas overall? Because one, they're going to continue to recruit him,
right?
And we need to talk about that. But two, now this is a number of losses in a row that were impactful ones, I would say. It happened first on the defensive line. Some people say, well, we got to figure this out. Where are you at on this with Texas and the overall situation in recruiting?
But I think the easiest thing to do is just say, well, we'll go flip guys in November before December 4th. But you may get a couple, but you're not going to get all these guys. So we know Steve Sarkisian and the staff will recruit through the whistle, which means all the way to signing day. We just use a different term for that. They're going to stay on their top targets. They're not going to walk away. I do think Dakorien Moore is ultimately going to be very difficult. That would be 2 decommitments for him. And I think that's going to be very difficult. You need coaching change. You need Dan Lane to say, I think I'm going to Gainesville on this one. I think it adds some pressure to Texas for sure. And you don't want to lose these recruitments now. So you can't just be thinking, oh, we'll just flip everybody in December. That's, that doesn't happen. You are going to stay on these guys. You may win 2 or 3 recruitments back through the coaching carousel or circumstance. But it puts more pressure on Khalil Lockett, Jamie French at wide receiver just to start, right? I think Texas is in good position with a number of guys, but now you don't have the momentum to help get you across the finish line with all these players. So that is going to be the key, is you got to get guys across the finish line and kind of kickstart and rebuild your momentum headed into the season, to where if you go into the big house and beat Michigan, like you went into Tuscaloosa and beat Alabama last year, that win over Alabama opened a lot of eyes and opened up the possibilities that Texas is looked at in a different way by prospects. If you can go into Ann Arbor and do the same thing this year, it's going to be the same type of story and the same type of result for Texas in recruiting. They will be able to go back in on some of these guys. They'll flip 1 or 2 guys. I don't know if DeAndre Moore is one of those, though. Dakorien Moore is one of those.
Yeah, I think that you're right. I mean, my take on it is that is a dangerous path to go down, where you're trying to only do that. You need to get more guys in the boat in that regard, because you can't just rely entirely on the back end. One of the things you mentioned that I thought was very interesting as it relates to that is you got to remember he plays for Duncanville. Duncanville is going to play 16 games this year. Reginald Samples, the head coach, historically does not allow his players to take visits during the season because he has them working out on Saturdays and Sundays together. And then furthermore, if you look at it, if there is a coaching move at Oregon, it will probably be after the early signing period in early December. And when I say coaching move, I mean either Dan Lanning or his offensive coordinator, Will Stein, or his running backs coach, Rashad Samples, who's the son of Reggie Samples. All of that will happen after early signing period. And Dakorien Moore, if you don't remember, is a mid-year graduate. Yeah. And so he will be going to wherever he chooses ultimately in January. And so I think that people want to come back in, and I think that's great. But I would say that Texas went down this road once before. Don't forget with Evan Stewart. He's committed to A&M right now, but we may get him. We think we're going to get him back later. And it didn't work out. So I think folks that see that and think that and automatically just, don't worry. What he says now doesn't matter. It's going to be what happens in November. Well, yeah, November matters. I'm not going to fib on that, but I can tell you this much. You'd much rather have him committed to you today than worrying about it the other way around, and which is what Texas is right now, but with this announcement from Dakorien Moore. Jerry, the other thing that I would add, to me, the issue here is there are certain players, a handful each year, Arch Manning, Anthony Hill, Ryan Wingo, guys that are just studs.
Right.
Okay. Those are the guys that end up making differences in ball games, big time differences in big games, because they have the ability to do so. Texas loses one of those possibilities today, because I would put Dakorien Moore in that category. Do you agree?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They lost their must-get recruit in this cycle. Some people would say Brandon Brown, but they lost their must-get recruit in this cycle. Duncanville kid, touchdown scorer. Sark's an offensive guy. This guy would fall right in line with the Bama receivers in 2019 through 2018 through 2021, right? He'd fall in line with those guys. They were all first-round picks. And that is in DFW, Duncanville High. That is a really big loss for Texas. There's no way we can sit here and be honest about it and say otherwise. He was the must-get recruit in the state of Texas for me in this cycle. So him not going to Texas that's a big loss for Texas, and one that is, you can come back from a lot, and Texas is going to get really good football players. They're going to have a good class, but this one really stings because, to your point, Bobby, he picked a defensive-minded head coach who doesn't have an NFL offensive scheme. So he really just said, I just prefer to be at Oregon.
Yeah. And a lot of people say, well, it must be NIL. I go back to the same thing I've always said. Everybody's money is the same color. People got to realize that ultimately this was a tough one for the Longhorns. Is it over completely? No, it's not over completely. But is it on its way? Look, to Jerry's point, he made a decision early in his recruitment to commit to LSU a year ago, almost at this exact, I think 2 or 3 weeks from now would be a year. When he stepped back from that commitment, he really seemed to take a different tact in this. Yes. Go visit all his schools, etc. I think it's interesting. Oregon's selling something there that's a little bit different, that making that guy feel like Oregon is the place he needs to be. So more power to him, I guess. But it does hurt the Texas Longhorns. I want to be clear on this, Jerry, even though we're talking about it here. One player does not make a football team.
No.
Okay. It will never be that way at the University of Texas. Okay. No. That being said, this one is one of those guys that could have been a guy that we talk about for a long period of time.
To your point, Bobby, remember the Adrian Peterson recruitment. When he went to OU, that was a skies falling moment. Adrian Peterson didn't leave Oklahoma with a national title or Heisman. Texas won a national title.
Yes. That's a great point. All right. That's going to do it for this special edition Dakorien Moore, young man out of Duncanville, state's #1 player, picks the Oregon Ducks over the University of Texas, as well as Ohio State and LSU. Tough loss there for the Longhorns on the recruiting trail. For Gerry Hamilton, I'm Bobby Burton. This has been On Texas Football.